This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.
What is happening, you guys? Welcome back to Let's Go Win podcast. We are going to be talking about something that I am definitely passionate about, but not nearly as much as this gentleman. Tim Kachuriak is the founder and chief innovation and optimization officer for NextAfter, a fundraising research lab consultancy and training institute that works with charities, nonprofits, and NGOs to help them grow their resource capacity. Tim, what is happening, my brother? How you doing?
JM, thanks for having me on the show.
It's truly my pleasure, man. I am, this is always awesome when I get to speak to people that truly have what I call servant leadership. Whenever you're in this space, which is nonprofit, which is philanthropy, some of what you do, you guys are typically remarkable human beings. And I told you already, my best friend, this is what he's made his career out of. So how did you get to be in this space, and why is nonprofit fundraising? Why is that so important to you?
Well, like most people that work in the nonprofit space, I took a very indirect pathway there. So my backstory is, I graduated from college right after 9/11. Horrible time to enter into the job market, especially for somebody who desperately wanted to work in the field of marketing and advertising. But fortunately, I worked at a country club all during high school and college. So I like to joke I had 432 aunts and uncles that were captains of industry. And so the guy who was the president of the country club was also the president of the second largest ad agency in Pittsburgh. So I went and met with Uncle Joe. I said, hey, Joe, can I come down and see you? He's like, sure. I go and do my dog and pony show. He's like, look, I'd love to hire you, kid, but we just laid off 30 people yesterday. 9/11 has hit our industry hard, our agency harder, and can't help you. And so that was my experience, the first 6 months out of college, just literally wandering in the wilderness, knocking on doors, trying to get somebody that would give me a shot. And eventually met this gentleman who was a serial entrepreneur himself. He operated, several different small businesses. And he's like, maybe you could do a couple projects for me. I said, that sounds great. He's like, you know what? Why don't you start a business? I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. He's like, well, I do. We've got an incubator on the second floor of our office building. I'll give you a desk. I'll introduce you to people. I'll be your partner, and the rest is up to you, kid. So I'm like, well, what do I get to lose? I'm living in my parents' basement. Got no romantic interests. I've got nothing to lose, right? So I ended up starting a business out of college called Ambience Interactive. This is back in 2002. So this is before a lot of ad agencies had in-house digital capabilities. We were like a little digital marketing boutique. Did that for about 5 years. Loved what I was doing. Wasn't super excited about the clients. Not that they were bad. I mean, we had a lot of, we're kind of like linked up with these general market ad agencies. So whatever clients they had were our clients. But a lot of automotive dealerships and law firms and things like that. Again, nothing wrong with like car dealers and lawyers, but just didn't really spin my wheels. So about 5 years in, my church was doing a capital campaign to build a new building. And so I volunteered our agency to do all the marketing for that campaign. And it was the first time that I was doing something that I felt like I was wired to do, but doing it for a cause I cared about. And it's like, once you get bit by that bug, it's hard to go back and make car dealership websites, right? So I had this crisis of career. What am I going to really do for the rest of my life now? And had the opportunity to go and work at a nonprofit organization. So in a matter of a month, I sold my house, I sold my business. My wife and I, with our 16-month-old, and my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time, we moved from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I went to work for a nonprofit. And I was there 6 hours, and the founder of the organization had a heart attack. And it's important to point out at this point in the conversation that correlation is not causation. At least I hope not. I hope I wasn't the reason that the guy kind of, checked out. But it was kind of like a tough time for them because they had never, he had been there for 35 years, was at the helm, and, all the major donors really gave because of his leadership. And, we're kind of at a crossroads as an organization. But it was at that point that I realized that there's basically these marketing agencies that work exclusively with nonprofits. I had no idea that existed. And we happened to work with one based out of Dallas, Texas, called KMA Direct Communications. And I got to know the CEO, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come to Dallas? I'm not sure what your future looks like here, but we've been doing direct mail for 35 years. We're trying to move into this brave new digital world. Maybe you can help us start a digital fundraising division." So that was my first kind of taste of the agency side. I was there for about 2.5 years and learned a lot, and we had some great success. We got acquired by another agency also in Dallas. And it was between those two experiences that I just really kind of found my niche, which was like focusing exclusively on how we optimize digital fundraising. And that's really what NextAfter does today.
And I want to dive into that, but I got to go back. I'm just envisioning you rolling down the freeway with baby in tow, one bun in the oven, wife 8 months pregnant, and I'm selling the house, the business, and I'm just moving from Pennsylvania to Florida because I got bit by the bug. Brother, you got to get into this a little bit. What did that conversation go like with your wife? Because I can't imagine that's like, "Oh, hey, this is great timing. You should do this." But maybe she is that supportive. That's literally incredible if that's the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, and actually she did it again, because when we moved to Dallas, we now had a 3-year-old, we had a 16-month-old, and she was 8 months pregnant with our third. So we did it again. And then she got pregnant again with our fourth. And I just called the real estate agent. I said, obviously, we're going to move. I don't know where, but this time it was at least across the county, not across the country. So that makes things a little bit better. But you're right. Behind, every successful person is somebody that, kind of walks with them through that journey. And for me, that was my wife.
And incredible. And 4 kids to boot. I mean, are you driving a minivan? I guess that's the most important thing I should ask right now.
Yeah, we did for a while, and we moved on to SUV because, I was like, well, we can drive a minivan, but I have to constantly have a surfboard attached to the roof of it just to make it seem like it's cool. But like once you live in Dallas, you're kind of landlocked, so it doesn't really make sense anymore.
That's a weird look with the surfboard. Anyway, to all those minivan drivers, no offense. I think of 4 kids and I immediately go there. So, brother, what is NextAfter? Tell me more about it, because when you said NGOs, I'm literally like, I don't know what that is. So what are you guys all about? What is NextAfter? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, great question. So NextAfter today is really 3 things. So we're a fundraising research lab, we're a consultancy, and we're a training institute. And I'll kind of explain those 3 different pieces and how they fit together. Starting first with the research, we focus on doing 2 kinds of research. The first type is what I refer to more as forensic research. We're going out analyzing large amounts of data across the nonprofit sector. And what we're looking for in the data is patterns that lead to opportunities to unlock greater digital fundraising performance. So we're hyper focused around digital. We believe, like many, it's the future of fundraising, but it's still a very underdeveloped opportunity within most nonprofits. The problem is, what we found in our research is that the kind of data we're most interested in analyzing either doesn't exist or it's not readily accessible. Because what we're trying to experience is like the nonprofit, the charity from the donor's point of view. And so we found the best way to get that perspective is by becoming donors ourselves. So about 4 or 5 times a year, we'll launch one of these major mystery donor studies. As the name implies, what we'll do is subscribe to hundreds of different organizations at the same time. We'll monitor everything they send us, every email, text message, voicemail. We got boxes of direct mail piled up to the ceiling. We analyze every piece of correspondence, and we wait for the organizations to invite us to become a financial partner by making a gift. And when they do that, we'll go online to their website and we'll give a donation as small as $20, as large as $5,000. And then we continue to monitor how they communicate and engage with us over time. What we're trying to do is map this kind of like donor journey from, visitor to subscriber to donor and beyond. And it's fascinating. And what's always interesting is just how wildly varying the communication experience is from organization to organization. So we'll take some of the insights that we gleaned from the mystery donor studies, and we'll use it to power the other kind of research we do, which is applied research. And that's where we're basically using the web as not just a channel of communication, but as a platform, a living laboratory where we can run rigorous scientific experiments to try to figure out what works and what doesn't. So to date, we've documented over almost 3,000 online fundraising experiments, and we've learned a whole bunch of stuff. One of the problems with being a consultant is that everybody looks at you like you have all the answers. And deep down inside, we know we don't, right? And so when I discovered testing and using the web as a lab, it was so liberating because finally I knew how to go find the answers. It's by listening to the donors themselves. So that's kind of the research side. And then we just take everything we learn and bring it over to the two other parts of our company. The institute's really our training, equipping arm. We develop tons of resources for nonprofits. Most of them are free templates, guides, ebooks. We do webinars twice a month. And then we've developed 8 different certification courses that teaches the things that we found to be effective to as many nonprofits as we can. What we discovered along the way is that NextAfter is not a nonprofit, but we're very much a cause-based organization. And we believe our cause is to decode what works in fundraising and get it into the hands of as many nonprofits as possible so that we can achieve our vision, which is unleashing the most generous generation in the history of the world. That's what really spins my motor. And then the final piece is our consultancy. We work with about 38 nonprofits, generally pretty large organizations, national organizations, international organizations. And we basically function as their digital agency.
So I want to make sure I captured that correctly. You said we want to unleash the most generous generation ever on mankind. Did I hear that correctly?
That is the vision, man. If we can keep pointing our ship towards the horizon of unleashing the most generous generation in the history of the world, even if we miss, we still do something that I think is pretty great.
No, it is pretty great. And you mentioned something about being cause-based, which I love the way you said that. It's like, that's a newer idea, if you will. It's not that organizations have always existed. They've had their mission statement, but this cause, it's so much greater. And I think my question goes to, in all this data that you're collecting, what makes people give? What is really revving their engines? What are you finding in the data to say, as a donor, this is why I'm giving to this cause or to that cause?
Yeah. And what's so funny is like many things that people do, giving is an incredibly irrational decision. I mean, it does not make sense. If somebody like landed from another planet, and I try to explain to them, so yeah, nonprofit, like, you give your money and the benefit goes to somebody else or some other cause or some other thing. Like, you actually don't get anything tangibly in return. It just doesn't make sense, right? Which means that giving has to come from some sort of deeper place. And what we're learning is that, there's different reasons why people give. Some people give out of a sense of duty, responsibility, especially older generations, right? They are the ones that say, look, this is my responsibility to make sure that I continue this thing or continue on or keep things great for my kids and my grandkids, the next generation. Some people give for different reasons, out of a sense of belonging. I give to be part of something. Some people give towards impact. They want to see how their gift can tangibly benefit someone else or some other cause. Some people give out of anger, frustration, especially like political givers, right? They're giving because they're mad about what's happening, and they're going to go fight for their rights or fight to change this or fight to do that or to get their voice to be heard. So it's a very personal experience giving. Some people give as an extension of their identity. Like, this is how I view myself. And by giving, by extension, I'm communicating to the world, like, this is who I am, right? So it's really not one set answer. It's just a collective group of answers.
One of the things that we talk about, my wife and I, especially because she's literally created a nonprofit herself. And part of why she did that is so often you hear of these groups where, okay, let's say I donate a dollar, but only 10 cents is actually going towards the cause. Without calling any specific organization out, because that's not the point of what I want to do today. But how can we research this to know that the money that we're sending is going towards the cause truly? And I don't know the right formula, right? I want people to get paid and you have to fund. I understand all that. Mm-hmm. But 90 cents on the dollar not going to that doesn't feel right to me. Do you have some basic tenets that you could tell people, like, hey man, when you're going to send money, these are some of the research things you might want to consider?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different kind of charity watchdog organizations like guidestar.org or Charity Navigator, and they rate organizations based on those efficiency metrics, like how much money goes to programs or, to the field or whatever, and then how much goes to administration and fundraising and marketing. I think that the challenge with that is that we've kind of like gone so far the other direction where we're so focused on measuring efficiency that we don't do a good job of measuring impact. And just to give you an example, like, let's think about this. Like, say we have two organizations, they both do the same thing, right? One is $1 million organization and they have 99% efficiency, meaning 99 cents out of every dollar goes to the work. The other organization's $100 million and they're 50% efficient, meaning like, 50 cents out of the dollar goes to the impact, but they're much larger. So one is creating $999,000 worth of impact. The other one's creating $50 million worth of impact. And if we think about some of the social challenges and problems in this world, we're not going to get there by, just being super efficient. You know what I mean? Like we have to actually go and create economies of scale to go tackle these big, huge, looming issues that exist inside of our society. So it gets a little bit tricky if you use efficiency as the ultimate metric of whether or not the organization's doing good. It's really about, what are they doing to accomplish their mission and how positioned are they to be able to go do that?
No, that's great advice. Honestly, I wouldn't have thought of it necessarily that way, but I imagine if I'm a nonprofit and I'm only generating, again, this is not to scoff at $1 million versus $50 million, but there's a big discrepancy here. Does it come down to it is marketing where their message isn't getting out there? They're not branded appropriately, or perhaps it's just not the right cause. I don't know, man, because
Right.
literally I'm stepping into landmine after landmine. I don't know this world. I just write checks. So tell me more, like how can is it literally come hire NextAfter so we can get your cause to a greater spot?
Yeah. I mean, fundraising isn't just about like generating money for the cause. It's about getting share of mind, right? And share of heart, right? Because then you get share of wallet that comes after that. And so if you can get more and more people on board with the cause, like again, it's just like anything else. When you have the mob, like then anything is possible, right? you can go tackle any sort of problem because it's important to people. So, I think that's fundraising sometimes gets labeled as this necessary evil, you know what I mean? Or this like thing that we have to do so we can go, really just do the important work of whatever, it is that charity does. But really fundraising is about just getting people to care, right? You can't get people to give unless you first get them to care. So, and again, just compare it to like the multi-billion dollar, trillion dollar corporations that spend billions and billions and billions of dollars trying to get us to buy their stuff, right? I mean, like, do you think that they would have got to where they're at? I mean, do you think that Amazon is as big as they are because they're trying to maximize profits or because they're trying to maximize growth, right? So it's like, you can just, again, nonprofits kind of get labeled as what they are not. They are not for profit. And so, you kind of get lost in terms of, well, what are they actually for? And I think what we need, and I think what's really starting to emerge is organizations that are taking a different look at how we track and report impact, which is really, I think, more important.
So how are they doing that, brother? How is a new way to track impact to say, hey, this is what we were able to create, whether it's dollars and cents or man hours that we can give towards a cause? How can we really say, man, we did something great. This impacted this thing. I don't even have a good example to give, but how can we start to change our metrics on how the impact is being created with this cause?
Yeah, I mean, so if you take, for example, an organization that is working on unemployment, right? So an organization is trying to get more people to connect with opportunities to be plugged into the economy. There's lots of big data that they can use to track that. And then they can track the impact of their programs and they can kind of create metrics to be able to say, look, we are making progress towards reducing this, whatever, this social ill that we're focused on. Right. So it's like, it's about, doing a better job of using some of the capabilities that exist today with big data and, metrics and KPIs and all that stuff.
So I have to imagine your world changed slightly, or at least the nonprofit world did with COVID, because when I think of nonprofit, I'm thinking we are going to typically a dinner or a gala and there's going to be a silent auction or maybe some other form. where, that's what I think of. But obviously the world shut down for a better part of a year. Has that radically shifted, good, bad, or indifferent, that industry?
Yeah, for sure. So I think what happened last year in 2020 is that the nonprofit industry got a much needed violent shove into digital transformation. And I'll just kind of speak to it from a fundraising point of view, because like that's really, where I'm focused. Um, Blackbaud, which is the largest CRM company in our space, they put out every year the charitable giving reports, and it reports on about $40 billion worth of giving. So it's a pretty big data set. And the nonprofit space, surprisingly, actually grew by 2% last year. So money given to nonprofits increased by 2% overall. Digital increased by 21%. So the other channels were down. You're right. They didn't do their fundraising events last year. They didn't do, a lot of their face-to-face, flying around the country, meeting with their donors face-to-face. And so digital was really the lifeline. And that's why I'm kind of excited, because we're positioned really well to be right in the middle of all that stuff. And so all the stuff that we've been talking about over the last decade about digital transformation, everyone's kind of perked up and taking interest in that. So that's, I think, one of the biggest ways that everything has really shifted. It's that they finally have seen the power of using digital to integrate into their fundraising as well as their program.
So obviously donor relations is a big part of continuing to have your, I guess, core base of clients that are going to donate year after year. But in the digital space, it's different. You're not shaking a hand necessarily. You're not kissing a baby, if you will, but you are literally doing it similar to what we're doing today, or maybe through, I don't know, whether it's email or text or whatever you're doing digitally to do it. How has that shifted the donor relationship that it used to be to what it is today?
Yeah. Most nonprofits traditionally have grown their organization's support base through direct mail. So I'm sure you've probably received direct mail from any number of charities over the course of your life, right? And that's really how most organizations have grown. And what digital represents is a new opportunity to move towards what we call digital first fundraising. And there's several reasons why this is really advantageous for the charity. The first is this: when we look at donors that give based on their channel of giving, so if we look at like offline only donors, so these are people that just like write checks, versus like people that give gifts online, versus the group that what we call multi-channel donors. So they give both online and offline in a 12-month cycle. The multi-channel donors are by far the most valuable, and they also retain at the highest rate. So then if you look at, well, where do those donors come from? Do they come from offline inception, or do they come from digital inception? And on average, 209% higher probability of becoming a multi-channel donor if you come in through digital. So that's one reason why it's really exciting. The other reason is that I don't have to put as much capital risk. So like approaching it just from like a business standpoint, if I'm going to go do direct mail acquisition, I got to put at least 10,000 pieces in the mail, right? Just to figure out if it works. And guess what? I don't find out for 3 months if it works or not. So with digital, I can go spend $100 on Facebook ads. I can test a bunch of offers. I can test to different audiences, and I can look at my metrics, and I can continue to test and optimize to increase the performance of that offer, and then scale out once I've got a winner. So that's kind of the case that we're trying to make for that digital first mentality.
It's kind of crazy. I think about it just because, again, I did digital mail, or no, excuse me, I did direct mail for many, many years. And if you got 1 to 2%, you're doing great. But the ROI, to your point, $100 versus 10 grand, and to have a better, I guess it'd be open rate, a better engagement rate versus trying to send it through snail mail, get it back. And some of the things that now it makes sense to me. It's crazy to think it's taken this long to really ramp up to where people are still doing direct mail. I hope not, now that I think of it this way.
Oh, they most certainly are. So direct mail is still the workout horse for most nonprofits in terms of generating like a huge share of their revenue. This is the first year that actually digital was higher than 10% of total giving. And it was actually 13% this past year. So, I mean, it never got over 10%, and it was over 13%. So I think, again, all this is starting to come together. It's starting to click inside the minds of most nonprofit leaders, and they're saying, look, it is a time to change the way that we fundamentally approach this stuff. But you have to keep in mind, the nonprofit industry is incredibly risk averse. And for good reason. I mean, you think about it, we're trying to shepherd donors' sacrificial, in many cases, gifts to our organizations, and we're trying to be good stewards of those resources. And that puts a tendency for people let's just keep doing the same thing we've been doing because, if we test something and it doesn't work, then, that could be it, right? We're not going to go bet the farm on it. But what we say is, look, you don't have to bet the farm. You can make smaller bets, right? And then scale up over time. So it's actually better stewardship and it's better risk mitigation than what you're currently doing.
Well, and if I just think of it, I mean, my gosh, if I think of how many people are on Facebook right now, is it, I know it's in the multi-millions, if not billions, probably at this point.
Yeah, it's, I think it's over 1 billion now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have 1 billion versus, and now I think of direct mail. It is really, to think how archaic that thinking is, to say we're going to send out this much and it's going to cost such a ridiculous, it's so much more to send that out. And it's not nearly as efficient. I'm on board, man. You're doing some good stuff. This is good. Tell me, I had to ask the question because NGOs, I'm like, what the hell is that? What does that mean? So you are working with charities, nonprofits, and NGOs. Who are they exactly?
Which organization specifically?
Or just NGOs, because I didn't know what that meant. And if I didn't know, I want to share with everybody else so they know what it means.
Yeah. I mean, NGOs are typically organizations that work internationally and are kind of like multinational nonprofits. So, they may have like local partnerships with different service providers in other areas, but it's, providing services that, maybe could come from the government, but actually comes from, private foundations or separate funding sources. So it's just another term for nonprofit.
I gotcha. Is there anything specific that you would share with the audience to say, here's what probably the biggest misnomer about this, what I do, what the nonprofit world is all about, so that we can have a better understanding of how to support what you guys are doing? Because look, I want to be part of the most generous generation ever. So what are we missing out on? What are some of the key things that you're like, I wish everybody knew this about this space?
Well, I think just how broad it is. I mean, I don't know if many people realize that it's a $452 billion a year industry every year. The nonprofit sector employs 10% of the U.S. workforce. I mean, it is a very, very big space, and that it really probably touches every single person in some way, right? Like, I don't think we realize also just how unique the United States is compared to the rest of the world. I mean, like, the not just the number of dollars that are given, but the number of people that participate in philanthropy here is so broad and so rich. And it's just, it's pretty awesome. So I think everybody should just realize that, like, giving is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to, really make a difference in your community, in your world, in your relationships with the people that are close to you. So it's just a great opportunity to do something that takes you out of yourself and helps you focus on others.
Well, no doubt, giving is honestly, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself. It's kind of selfish in that endeavor. When you give, you feel better. It truly, you live longer when you give. So there's a lot of reasons to do it. Let me ask you this. What has been, if I wanted to do more research, are there any books out there, any resources that you're like, man, I just wish the general public might look at this, or maybe there's some documentaries that we should be looking at that you have really shaped your thinking and can help us even understand what this nonprofit world's all about?
Yeah, there's a guy named Dan Plata. He did a TED Talk. It's probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And he's talking about like the problems with the charitable space, the nonprofit space. And he really kind of gets into some of these issues like efficiency. He talks about like how nonprofits have a really difficult time attracting and retaining key talent because we can't pay them what we could pay the CEO for Coca-Cola, right? And so if you're trying to get somebody that's supposed to solve cancer, and they could do that, or they can make 10, 15 times as much working in the for-profit space, then all of a sudden all of our talent's going away. But that would be a great one to take a look at. It's short, like 10 minutes or whatever TED Talks are. But yeah, Dan Pallotta, if you just search Dan Pallotta TED Talk, that's a great place to start.
Awesome. And where's NextAfter? What are you guys going next? What is NextAfter?
Yeah.
In the next 5 to 10 years, brother, kind of what's your vision of where you're going? Yeah,
great question. So, I feel like up to this point, we've learned a lot about, kind of behavioral economics and, why do people give, and like, what are some small, like low hanging fruit things that we could do to make it easier for people to give, to express a value proposition, more effectively. What I'm interested in now is, how do I actually create better lifetime relationships with donors using digital? And so we have actually partnered with the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy in the UK. We actually appointed the NextAfter fellow that actually works there. And their job is to take some of the work that they're doing in philanthropic psychology and translate it into things that we can test online to find ways to use digital to create these deeper relationships with donors, and ultimately do fundraising in a way that actually builds donors' well-being, as opposed to taking something away. So that's kind of where we're headed next.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you're like, JM, I got to get this to the audience? You should have known to ask this, but you just didn't. So is there anything you want to make sure to leave them with before we kind of wrap up?
I guess the question that you may have asked is, I don't know. I think you asked every question that I could possibly want to answer. So I think it's good.
Well, brother, how can our listeners connect with you online and learn more about what you're doing, what NextAfter is all about? Where's the best place to connect with you?
Probably the best place to start is our website. So nextafter.com. All of our research, it's all open source there. You can go download any of our studies or review any of our different experiments we've performed, and take any of our courses. And then if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn. If you just Google Kachuriak, I'll pop up. There's not a lot of us out there. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
Guys, check him out. Let's be part of the most generous generation ever. That sounds like a good time to me. I appreciate the work that you're doing, brother. And thank you so much for being here today.
Awesome, Jam. Thank you so much for having me.
You guys, be sure to check it out. Again, my best friend, this is the work he does. I'm passionate about it. My wife is passionate about it. I didn't know about NextAfter until today. I can't wait to support what they're doing so they can support more nonprofits. All right, you guys, until next week, continue getting better every day and transcend in life. We'll talk to you then. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.